Hi, this is Meg Riley, and it is Thursday, so this must be The View. I am here in beautiful Minneapolis where it's been perfect gardening weather, hot and then raining, and hot and then raining. Perfect, just what you want. How's everybody else today?
Hi, I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford. I'm in Austin, Texas, and we are drying out. It is sunny. It's going to be getting up to about 90, so it's feeling more like normal.
Hi everybody, this is Patrice Curtis. I am having video issues, so you will hear my voice, but you perhaps might not see me. I'm here in DC, and it's been raining actually for the last 3 or 4 days. We haven't seen any sun.
Hey, Hank Purse here. I'm in lovely Medford, Mass. It's chilly. It's like 60, but life is good.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington, and it is sunny today in Seattle. It's nice.
So our special guest today is Chris Crass, activist and author in Nashville, Tennessee. Chris, we're so glad you could be with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Behind that chalice is Bob LaValle, who's doing our tech, and he is going to, there he is. Hey, Bob. And Patrice, we hope to see you at some point, but at least we'll get to hear your voice. So it's GA starting to come. If you are watching this, you can see why I warned you. You should get your haircut early. I got mine 2.5 weeks early. It's going to look great at GA. I know that I look like Mo of the Three Stooges right now. Thank you. I'm aware of that. But it's going to look great at GA. So if you like me, need to grow into your haircut, this is the week. That's my public service announcement. Who else has something you want to say?
No real announcements, but here in Texas, we are, looking forward to that Supreme Court ruling on marriage equality. And, it's not, I keep saying something about, I wish I had a crystal ball, but actually there are so many moving pieces in this. I know that the ministers at Emerson in UU Church in Houston yesterday spoke to some of their Texas equality allies and activists. And it's really complicated in terms of, it could be that, we are kind of assuming that we're going to get a pro-marriage equality decision, that it's not going to be something catastrophically bad. But even if it's good, it could mean that they say, okay, it only pertains to the district that this came through, which was the 6th district. And so the rest of you're going to have to wait for your things to wind through the courts. In our case, well, something is out at the 5th district, and they, haven't given up. It's assumed that they would be pro-marriage equality, but they just held off on giving their answer. There's just so many different things, and so trying to do any planning about, okay, so are we going to open up the church, we have a rabbi, a synagogue that shares a building with us, and so Rabbi Marie and I are planning on some sort of an event where people can come in and say, do you want a rabbi or a reverend, and let's get married. But when? So it's just a whole lot of excitement and waiting and trying to read tea leaves at this point.
Well, now, a couple of states now have said, I'm getting an echo. A couple of states have said that even if it comes, they're not going to let it happen. Governors have been saying that. Has anyone said that in Texas? I know you went to the legislature. But.
Right. They tried to. We actually had 23 pieces of anti-LGBT legislation proposed. None of them passed, including none of the ones about marriage. Now, the governor still could come back and call a special session. At this point, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but who knows. Right now, the big conversation is about the county clerks and what they're going to do, because in Texas, any county that issues a wedding certificate, you can use it anywhere in the state. So like where I am, I'm in Williamson County, which is conservative, and that county clerk is probably not going to issue any until she absolutely has to. But a mile down the road is Travis County, and the county clerk came out this week and said, As soon as I can, I'm issuing them. So right now, the news is, going and talking to all of the different county clerks and seeing what they're saying.
It sounds. I mean, the image I have in my mind is, of course, of like the governor standing in front of like the high school, like that, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah,
not allowing people to get married. Yeah.
Right. Is the National Guard going to come in and you will marry and Texas, for those of you who know the history of Juneteenth, that happened in Texas where, we had the Emancipation Proclamation, but word, somehow didn't get to Texas for 2 years when federal troops had to come in and enforce it. And, the joke that isn't really a joke that I've been making is I'm afraid that some of our politicians look at that and go, that worked so great. Let's do that again.
This is why you were greeting Obama as a liberator when he was taking over Texas.
You're out there with flowers, right?
Yes.
Hank, what's up with you?
Nothing. I spent last weekend performing the wedding of some friends. Probably the last of my friends who haven't been married yet and who will get married, probably will get married, and hadn't been married before, up in the Catskills on top of a mountain. It was great. It also sort of reminded me that so much of my ministry are to these folks who I grew up with here in the Boston music scene, and that I've known for 30 some odd years, and as well as folks that I grew up with in the Unitarian Universalist movement as well, who aren't part of a church, but that they sometimes need a minister to do stuff, and certainly it was great to be able to go up, do this beautiful wedding in this beautiful place, and be surrounded by people whom I've known forever, and to be honest, not have to explain myself to everybody, which is always kind of nice, and to be like and to be in fact like I'm kind of like the normal one, which in itself a lot makes you kind of realize like where I am on the scale of some of my friends. And it was great. It really was wonderful. And before that, I had stopped and visited with the family of an old friend who had died many years ago. But just being able to go and check in with them was great. So it was just a really wonderful weekend. I'm still feeling the love. So it's great.
That's fabulous.
And I'm also really getting excited about GA. It'd be fun. There's gonna be there's gonna be lots of weird energy there, and I think that'll be. I think we're sort of
got the nude bike ride going on, and some beer festival, and that's Portland.
Yeah, but I think also there's a lot of emotions going on, a lot of it, and I think that it feels in some way like it's going to be a tipping point. That people are just like, we're fed up, we want something different, we want to do, and that like something's going to come out of this that'll be good. So
hopefully we'll tip in a good way. There's certainly a lot of emotion. Speaking of which, right now there's a summit on economic sustainability and ministry going on, and Tom Shade is there from our group. He'll talk about it next week, I'm sure, and so will we. But there's been a lot of anxiety around that I think because the need is so great, will it really address the communities that most need it? Are the right people there? Who's doing, just lots of questioning going on. And so it's being tweeted, I know, at Sustain Ministry. I was looking at the handle this morning and just seeing what had happened so far. It looked like a nice worship service to launch it. So we wish you well, those of you considering this very important issue. Yeah.
Meg, I have a question about that. I had only heard about it when you mentioned it earlier this week. Who put it together and who got invited and how?
Well, that's the kind of questions getting asked online. So Richard Nugent posted from the Office of Church Staff Finance that his office put it together, and Sarah Lammert worked on it. I know Loretta has a person there. The musicians have a person there. Joanna, do you know something you were going to chime in with?
No, I probably know the same thing that you do, which was it seemed like the number one thing that they were trying to go for was to have a representative from all of the different groups, that have something to do with this.
So and I don't know what's going to come out of it. I asked Richard that when he posted, but he's at the summit, so I'm sure he didn't have time to respond, and maybe they don't know yet. I don't know. Sorry, Patrice, go on.
Well, I was just going to say there's been, if folks haven't seen it, there's been a new webpage added to the UUA website on emerging ministries, which is really rich and wonderful. There's a really nice video done by Eric Resley Martinez on this whole idea of emerging ministry. There are a couple of papers on efforts that have happened before, you know, kind of what's gone right, where the challenges have been. So there's really, and then you couple that with the UUMA's entrepreneurial 2-year program that they have going on. Although they also have a little mini program going on, which I've joined. We haven't had our meetings yet, and that's like 4 webinars. So I'm curious to see how great that will be. But my hope is that the UUA and the UUMA will begin to talk with each other about these, you know, about what's going on, and you know, hopefully something rich will come out of this. I think this is really where we need to go, which is an addition to what we do. I think that we need all of these various ways of reaching out and reaching more people. So I'm really excited, and I would encourage anybody to go to the webpage, because the webpage is really good. It's clear to me. Felt to me like they really put a lot of effort into it. It's really easy to use. They've got great graphics as well as text. I mean, I really think I'm so hopeful. I'm really hopeful.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we have to. I think as a denomination, we have to decide how we are going to support these, because you know, I've now watched a couple of really exciting ones die.
Yeah.
And you know,
it's painful, isn't it?
It is. David Owen O'Quill with what he was doing, and
Original Blessings,
Original Blessing. Ian's leaving, and the thing is, when you look at other denominations that are like us, they're doing it very differently, and they're having success. Disciples of Christ has said, boy, we want to throw, I think they've said something like, we want to have 200 new congregations a year. And the UCC, this was very interesting to me. I went looking at one time, like just Googling, you know, Unitarian Universalist, how to plant a church, and there was really nothing. And you do the same thing, but you put in United Church.
Century, something from the 19th century.
Yeah, you put in something, you put in the same thing, but with United Church of Christ, and it takes you right to a manual, and this is how you do it. And, you know, how can we encourage this? How can we support this?
Yeah, hope we're getting there. Hope we're getting there. Yeah. And I think that there's something really potentially rich about having sort of parish-based entrepreneurial activities. I don't know, Joanna, if you've really been thinking about that. Just, again, in addition to completely different models from parish ministry. So, yeah.
CLF is always looking for collaborators. Right now we're working with the First Church in Portland, and also with Jake Morrill down there in the Knoxville area to do some collaboration, and always looking for more opportunities, because I think
not to toot my former organization that I belong to, but what I really have to say, Meg, is I've seen some new movement, I guess, some new, I don't know, infusion of something, ideas or whatever, and I'm really excited about where CLF is going. Really seen some really cool things that are kind of bubbling around. So
there's some good bubbling going on. Yes, yeah. There is, and GA, as we've all been saying, will be a great place for networking. So today, excitingly enough, we have Chris Crass visiting us. Chris has been speaking out, particularly I think within the UUA. He's been a real voice for white allies or white people who want to engage around racism. And Chris, I was moved recently by your piece lifting up Ashley Haran, who's local here where I am, and doing great work. And so tell us what you're seeing at this moment. It seems like we're really at a historic moment with white people waking up a bit. Is that what you're noticing too, or is it just always going on a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is absolutely a historic period. I mean, when Black liberation movement is on the move, the whole political geography of the United States shifts. I mean, we've seen this from anti-slavery organizing led by enslaved people who were fighting back slave insurrections, the Underground Railroad, the black and white led abolitionist movement through the civil rights movement. When Black liberation movement is on the move, and we see, uprisings, like Ferguson and Baltimore, it just changes. I mean, Hillary Clinton, the front runner Democratic Party, having her first major policy discussion be on mass incarceration and the need to start pulling back mass incarceration. Hillary Clinton was not waiting excitedly for the day that she could speak out against mass incarceration. The political geography has shifted because working class people, largely moms and women and young people in Ferguson, said Mike Browns are murdered in our community all the time. But with Mike Brown being murdered today in our community, we're going to fight back. So it's not that Mike Brown was shot and killed and that's what has shifted things, because that's been happening, the long history from lynching to, brutal torture of enslaved African people. So that's the history of that United States is continuous and ugly and horrifying. What's different is that when people rise up and say, we will not let this continue in our community, and are defiant and put forward a different vision of Black humanity being respected. So when Black liberation movement is on the move, it creates a moment for white people of being forced to choose, because the normal kind of everyday functioning of white supremacy is that post-civil rights movement, white supremacy can operate without explicit racists. White supremacy can operate because it's part of the institutions of every aspect of our society. It's part of the functioning of normal life. And so every white person in this country, every person in this country can be 100% committed to a colorblind, multiracial society, and then not do anything to change the existing institutions, and white supremacy will continue to function as it was designed to do, which is destroying the humanity of people of color, the communities of color, and twisting and deforming Black, white humanity into enforcing this kind of brutality. So with what's happening now, white society, instead of just being like, okay, well, the normal is just don't talk about racism, colorblind, Obama was elected, it's post-racial. Ferguson said white people have to make a choice. Are you on the side of the lynchers, of the Darren Wilsons, of the police who are pulling the triggers, and all of the journalists and the politicians and people in society who are justifying it? Or are you on the long history side of abolitionists, freedom riders, dream defenders, and the Ferguson movement today?
Chris, I want to stop for a second, and I know that there's a term that has been used, I think, a lot with your work, and that is collective liberation. Can you kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like as a young person, I came up into activism, as a teenager, and me and my friends were trying to figure things out. And I think for a lot of people, you start coming into your activism and you start seeing all the horrifying things that are out there in the world. You start seeing, okay, well, there's, this economic inequality, we need a living wage, we need all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things that are failing our communities and our lives. And then you start getting involved in activism, and you start realizing that it's not just that there's things out there, there's also things in here. And so if you're white, you start being, oh my God, I've got like, it's not just that there's this like white supremacy out there, there's like white supremacy in here. And then as a man, patriarchy is out there, but patriarchy is in here. And so, when you're young, I think any age, imagine yourself, you're a white person, you're a guy, and you're like, I'm on the side of the good. And then you have that first conversation where it's like, you know what, you're also a sexist, and and also, you know what, you're really contributing to perpetuating racism. I know you're against racism, but you're really actually perpetuating white privilege. It's devastating. It's devastating. And so when I started, really trying to do some soul searching, and me and my friends were doing soul searching around this, we started looking to women of color feminists. And Bell Hooks was an incredibly influential person in our lives and continues to be. And she has an essay that I recommend everyone check out, which is called Love as the Practice of Freedom. Love as the Practice of Freedom, which speaks to the importance of love, of a spiritual, grounded activism to move our work forward. It's very much a piece intended to bring faith and spirit and activism together. But in that essay, she talks about how systems of oppression are interconnected. So white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy. And yes, okay, like we know that, or we get to a point where we realize that. But then it was for myself, I was like, okay, so how do I as a white guy fit into that? And it started, thinking about, okay, well, if systems of oppression are interconnected, systems of liberation also must be interconnected. And so my liberation is different in terms of anti-racist struggle, but for me to try to figure out how to move white people towards anti-racism, I need to figure out how to communicate to white people why it is that anti-racism, why it is that feminism for men, why liberation is a collective process. That doesn't mean that we're all equally trying to get free. It doesn't mean that we're all the same, and so it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter. It's not a squishing everything together. It's what Angela Davis says we need to be doing in this period, which is developing complex unity. Understanding the ways that we are united, but in a way that recognizes the ways that we are also historically, structurally, institutionally divided and unequal, but then finding our unity within these divisions for a shared future, for a different value system. So collective liberation has spoken deeply to me and to many others as a vision of, yes, interconnected oppressions, and so what does that mean for who we are and how we experience reality today, and a vision of collective liberation moving forward, to be able to then think about, okay, so when I get involved in supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not just doing that because I want to see, I am doing it because I want to see Black humanity respected, institutionally valued, institutionally resourced and supported and affirmed, and the dignity of Black humanity being reflected in every aspect of our lives. And if Black humanity was actually dignified and respected throughout society, we would live in a much better world for all of us. And so
Yes.
Black Lives Matter means that we will be working towards a society in which all lives would in fact matter. But if we jump to all lives matter first, what we're doing is marginalizing and saying actually Black Lives Matter don't really matter, because no, all lives matter, which means that we're now forefronting white, male, middle class, Christian life. So that's where collective liberation is. Yes, we're all in this together. Yes, we all want to get free. And that doesn't mean we all just jump into the struggle in the same place and the same relations of power and privilege, but we don't let the divisions of power and privilege keep us from seeing a shared future and a shared strategy to move forward.
Chris, Aisha here. So as I'm hearing you talk, the what keeps going into my mind is the difficulty I have experienced, especially as a woman of color, as a religious leader of color who's not a minister, I'm a religious educator, talking to white UUs who think they're there and they're so far from there, it's painful, and connecting the dots, frankly, even with other white ministers who, things will come out of their mouth and I don't know whether to laugh or cry. So what have you found, or how, I guess the question is how have you been able to speak truth to power to other white UUs who think, hey, I'm already part of the UU world, I'm there? That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is trying to create a space of vulnerability with other white people, of being able to share. For example, I often lead with talking about my own experiences of trying to come to consciousness, of making mistakes, of thinking that I was there, and then realizing I wasn't. So as opposed to like walking up and, so with you, I would say it would be important to develop a strategy of having a team of people that includes some white folks that can talk to the white folks. So I think for thinking about this work, we need to think about how we can be a team where different people are playing different kinds of roles. And so when I was a part of a multiracial coalition, my community college, this working class community college, one of the leaders, this guy David Rojas, who was just brilliant, he was like, you know what, you and some of your white friends should really start trying to figure out how to organize the white people. And yes, it's important that we're all coming together in these multiracial spaces to vision and dream and strategize, but we can't just have like 5 white people who hate all the other white people and think that they're better than all the other white people and then just hang out with the people of color and talk badly about white people. I understand why you would want to do that, but it's not necessarily going to move our movement forward. And so I'd say with you being able to try to, are there one or two white people who you're able to be in conversation with, not in a let's talk badly about all the people in the congregation, which is not what you're saying. It's more of yeah, this is a reality. The majority of white people, even white people who think that they've got it, are still on the moving towards supporting white supremacy because it's institutionally, culturally all around us. So unless you're regularly, consciously deciding I'm going to try to do something different, then when you're just sort of yeah, I'm good, I'm cool, you're basically on the conveyor belt unconsciously moving towards support of white supremacy while saying, it's all good, I got this figured out. I took a Black history class back in school, whatever it is, and I'm not trying to speak
disparagingly. But I've been at this a long time. I just am blown away by how white supremacy kicks my butt day after day. It's amazing. It's just an amazingly tenacious force. And I think, the longer I've been out, just the more humility I've got. Damn, the day is never going to come when I'm not stupid about this stuff anymore. I hate that because part of white training is that we're supposed to know stuff, right? And so, yeah, so I was wondering what you're seeing because you're out in the churches a lot, right? It seems like you're talking to. So, are you noticing movement? And one thing that I've noticed is. As white people struggle to speak about racism and race at all, it just gets so awkward. I mean, it has to. You talked about vulnerability. It has to. But I've noticed a lot of the people of color that I know are just I just can't go to church right now. I mean, Aisha doesn't have that option. She works there, and Patrice. But but a lot of people who do have the option are just going, and including to my own to CLF, not right now. I just can't do it. It's too painful.
I'd have to say that and then Chris, you can weigh in, but I just want to say this because Meg kind of included me in that, and I want to say that I am not there yet. I am not feeling like I can't go to church yet. And I think part of but I've heard from people who are there.
And you're in a church that's been dealing with racism actively for decades, too. Right?
Yeah, I think my thing is, and I had a moment of real clarity around this when I was in seminary, and I had an experience in Ghana with the group of UUs that I was with. And it was a small group, and it was a really great trip. There was one thing that happened that really kind of clarified for this for me, and it's something that you just said, Meg, which is that, wow, it is awkward. This whole thing is incredibly awkward, and one thing that breaks my heart is when we do not, all of us, assume that people are trying. Even when they are, oh my gosh, really? I mean, is that, even when in our heads we're thinking, what? And what I saw happen and this actually brings me, what I have seen happen is that the people who are struggling, who are truly trying to engage, as Chris has been talking about, and as you just said, and still realize that, still getting it wrong. If they happen to get it wrong with the wrong person, I have seen them completely shut down. And then they are so afraid to say anything, to do anything, because of that time when they got, slapped upside the head, to use a grandma language. It doesn't serve anyone, and there's a way in which we have got to be, as we move through this work, to be relentless about moving through the work and being gentle and loving with each other while we do it, because we are going to get it wrong. There is not a single person, no matter what color you are, that has all the answers and knows exactly how to do this. And no matter how much I've been hurt by racism institutionally or through personal remarks from strangers. I mean, we are all in this together. And I just feel if we could get there, as you use now, I mean, I can't, if we could get to that point and realize, you know what, we can be vulnerable, as Chris said, with each other, right? We can be vulnerable, and we can hold a space of silence and love for each other. I just feel like we can be doing so much better. But there are folks who just get afraid to keep doing the work. They also get tired, and there's lots of other reasons, but they also just get afraid. And, I'd love to hear if Chris has, since you live and breathe this work, if you have any response to that, or any, I don't know, if you've seen ways of getting beyond that, because there are lots of people of color who are just pissed off and have had it, right?
Yeah, I think part of it too is thank you, Patrice. I think it's a really great reminder, and I think part of it, like that I see, is that people are white people are they're so frightened of being shamed publicly online, so everyone's waiting around for what's the perfect thing that I can do that will then show that so I don't make any mistakes, because people are afraid of if I make mistakes, someone's gonna oh, hear what he said, he did this, or they didn't get my joke, or and I think there's such a culture of that, and how easily that can sort of run rampant on social media, that someone did something and gets amplified. So I think a lot of people then are frightened, which then allows people to not do anything. At least white people not to do anything because of racial privilege, and I'll just be quiet and wait for people to do the right thing. Then I'll follow along on somebody else.
When something's proven to be the right thing, and then I'll jump on that. And
Before we let Chris respond to that really, really deep and excellent question, I just want to say we're halfway through The View. This is a week where we're interviewing Chris Crass, an activist and author, and the person who you can hear but not see is Patrice Curtis. So she is having a little technical difficulty, and I've noticed a few other people have gotten bumped off and come back. So this is live. It'll be the way it'll be. But Chris, I'd love to hear your response to Patrice's question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a spiritual journey that we're on. This isn't something that's outside of, well, we got to figure this out so that we can then have a spiritual community. Working through systems of oppression, working towards liberatory possibilities, is a deeply sacred, divine process that we're engaged in. And so for me, oftentimes, the awkwardness and the difficulties and so much of the challenges needs to be respected, as we need to bring forward our spiritual powers to engage in this way. We as UUs cannot think our way through this problem. We must engage our spiritual, our emotional, our historic memory to engage. This is sacred journey. This is not trying to figure out what are the answers I need to have, what's the right way to talk. We are in a historic moment where a multiracial democracy, where Black Lives Matter is on the front burner, and it's going to continue to be on the front burner. And so this is a time when our prayer, when our song, when our laying hands on each other and holding on to each other when it is hard, when we have to call forward these powers to help us. And so when I speak about vulnerability, I say when I talk with men or when I talk with white people, expressing my own process and pain and confusion as a way to make space for other people's pain and confusion. Because too often with anti-racist work with white people, there's a couple of white people who have been involved in this work and then are kind of shaming and blaming other white people about the ways that they aren't already anti-racist. I grew up in a society in which there were no role models for white people to be anti-racist. I grew up in a society in which there were plenty of role models for how white people could be racist. So white people in the UU world are not surrounded by examples of this is how I want to be in a life-affirming, Black liberation supporting, anti-racist way. People are trying to figure it out. So within the vulnerability, there also needs to be leadership. And so I try to bring and I encourage people who are of all different backgrounds. We need to bring leadership. And sometimes UUs can be afraid of leadership outside of the formal structure of a minister, of a UUA committee, of a UUA staff, but we need grassroots leadership of people who can bring forward a vision of not just what not to do. So with anti-racist work, there's often here's a way to not be a total jackass. And here's your 10 ways for all you white people out there. Try to memorize this list and don't be a jackass, which often means a lot of white people being scared to death to do anything, and then the primary goal is don't make a mistake. We want white people to have a list of here are ways to be awesome for justice, here are ways to rock it for anti-racism, and then the primary goal is how can I be an effective person for social justice, and I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but there's going to be people who are going to help support me, who are going to help move me and grow, not throw me away. Not throw me away when I make a mistake. And some people are going to be pissed and be like, I don't want to talk to you for a while. But that's not the same as saying you're out. Other folks, white folks, need to support white people on their journey. Folks of color need to be able to support each other. We need to think about how we work as a team within all of our communities and within the UU world. But we need white anti-racist leadership to be vulnerable and make space for white people's confusion and fear, and not just, you know, denounce people for not already arriving to where they're supposed to be, and to be able to show like there are things we can do. There are ways we can contribute to not only overcome our own personal bias or personal racism, but to contribute towards structural change. And we need to be able to have those lists and be able to point people to, you know what, I'm not as concerned about whether or not you say the wrong thing as whether or not you continue to look away from the institutional violence that's destroying communities of color. That's the bigger issue. Well-intentioned white people saying the wrong thing is not the biggest threat to communities of color. Unchecked institutional white supremacy and the violence of this system is the threat. Well-intentioned white people who are afraid and want to say the right thing can be a roadblock to moving that forward. So we need white anti-racist leadership to support white people. So when I go to churches, I don't talk about like, here's all the ways that we as UUs are like really messed up, or here's the ways that white folks and UUs, well-intentioned white people, reproduce racism. I mention my own process, but then I talk about these are ways that we can rock it. Here are ways that different churches have done really inspiring things. We need models. That's why I interviewed Ashley Horan, because it's like I don't want to make a list of like, hey, white UUs, here's ways to like stop being a jackass. We've got a lot of those lists. We've got hundreds of those lists. We need examples, role models, lists, visions of here's how we can rock it, not perfection. Perfection gets in the way of the good. UUs want to be perfect. There is no perfect. Perfect in utopia is the enemy of progress. It makes you think that you have to be perfect before you can move forward, which is impossible. You have to be in the work. You're going to learn through the work. And so we need leadership to hold people, support people, move people, and encourage people with an eyes on the prize. And I'm going to hold on to you as you stumble.
So, Chris, as I'm hearing you talk, and you may have addressed this in your writing, so forgive me because I haven't read it. One of the things that's difficult that I've seen is what it means to make space in our, I'm going to now talk the micro, in our congregations for leadership development of diverse voices. This is actually the workshop I'll be doing at GA with 2 other folks. And what does it mean? Who's at the table? And why is it important, frankly, to be intentional about having diverse voices? And I'll give you an example. We have right now, I work for a genuinely wonderful church. It happens to be an all-white board, not because the nominating committee went out of their way to ask the 10 people of color if they could be, and we're a 600-member church, beyond. They couldn't. So that is not for lack of trying. We had an incident where we had a consultant come in, and the vision team does have people of color on it, and so it was a meeting with the vision team and the board, and at one point the consultant said, who happened to be a white man, okay, I only want to talk to the board and minister. Every single person of color who was in the room had to leave. And to me, it was such a punch in the gut, because I said, okay, now all the diverse voices for the vision that we're saying we want for this congregation to be multicultural was just asked to leave the room. No, and I certainly didn't say, because I'm already kind of labeled, hey, this is now we have to, you know, we really should stay in this room because now every single diverse voice just is being asked to leave, and we did. So it's the micro of part of the list is be mindful of when you ask someone to be in leadership, it's like perfection. They don't just have to be on the board because for whatever reason they can't or aren't able to make that commitment, but have opportunities to hear those voices.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to have mechanisms of support, mentorship, being able to really support different leadership and being able to talk about why is it so vital for our churches to be able to have, exactly like you said, the leadership that you were speaking of, and being able to try to change some of the institutional thinking of there's only certain kinds of leadership that are supposed to make certain kinds of decisions.
Because we're very hierarchical. I mean, we are so committed, maybe not committed, but right now I feel like Unitarian Universalism is stuck in this white hierarchical Eurocentric model that isn't going to lead us to a collaborative multicultural vision if we stick to it. I do think it's starting to change. I feel that energy. I hope that continues because I think the opposite is going to hurt us. And it also is hypocrisy at its worst, that we have the well-meaning white people that simply hang on to Eurocentric white power structures in our congregations.
Right. And then one of the challenges, Ashley Horan talked about this in her this interview that I did with her, where there's both this institutionalist kind of framework of really like looking at who are the institutional people that need to make decisions, but then there's also kind of an anti-authoritarian culture that doesn't support grassroots leadership to start moving things forward and starts kind of questioning, well, who are you to be telling us what to do? And like we're all supposed to be individuals. And so, I mean, I believe in a healthy, collective, anti-authoritarian, challenging structural oppression, but there's also kind of a way that whenever a different kind of leadership that you're talking about, potentially with this like visioning team, starts to emerge, a sort of almost like a rejection of sort of like, well, these people are trying to tell us what to do, or these people are challenging my individual choices, but then also this very, well, we can't, the institution has to figure all these things out. So this like combination of an institutionalist mindset with also a kind of push against visionary leadership that starts to try to move the congregation and the faith in a different direction. So we need to just figure out what are the ways that we can support that leadership. And so we always have to look for where's the momentum, where are the possibilities to move things forward and not get completely stuck on the roadblocks. There's always going to be roadblocks. And so there's like 3 people in the church that everyone can be like, that person's never going to let us do anything. Well, those 3 people do not have to control the church. If they control your mind and those are the people you always think about, you need to think about the other people that are like, you know what, these 3 people also seem to want to make something happen. How can I help support them to start having a more influential voice in the church? Who are the supporters that I haven't noticed because I'm so focused on the roadblock people that I've completely lost touch with? Actually, there's a bunch of people that support us or would support us if we put some time into them. And so stop arguing with the roadblock people all the time and try to figure out how do we pacify the roadblock people, how do we galvanize the people that want to make something happen and build some momentum that creates a different kind of power, if that makes sense. But we need to always be thinking about where's the momentum, because there's always going to be roadblocks. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be things that make us want to call it quits at the end of the day. But we also have to figure out how to cultivate a real clear sense of where's the possibility. What did we do better today that we didn't do well yesterday? What can we build? What's the momentum? What are the positives? What are the assets? What are the strengths that we can work from to accomplish our vision? And so like what Meg said earlier, yes, it's true for white people. Every day there's some way that white people are like, oh man, I'm still stupid about race. But we also need to be able to start thinking about, you know what, I'm also getting smarter on liberation. And my soul is starting to feel more nourished than it was a year ago because of this work. So we can't tell people, hey, get involved in this work and you're going to, for the rest of your life, you're going to feel stupid and ignorant and totally not know what you're doing. That's true, Meg. That's true. I'm not trying to say that. But we also need to let people know that coming into this work means opening our hearts and our souls to beloved community, embracing the sacred journey that we are on, and that we will find the humanity that we want, not just in the words we read at church, but in the ways that we breathe and live and interact with each other, if that makes sense.
It does. And let me just say, first of all, absolutely. There's a way, I think, as a white person, that acknowledging that with genuine humility is very freeing. Like, man, this is big. It's bigger than me. And so then if I make a mistake, it's like, well, why wouldn't I? Of course I will. So there's real freedom in it. I wondered if you had some kind of mountaintop moments you could share when you saw the gate open to more energy, you saw an obstacle be overcome. I think just the way we need models of individuals, we need models of moments. At least I do. I love to hear about those moments, like when you've just seen, we're not in Kansas anymore, something new emerges. I mean, I would say here, a really exciting thing going on in Minneapolis right now is that our NAACP has been absolutely dormant. I mean, I Googled it when I moved here, and all I got was infighting, just pages of infighting. So it kind of died. And then this fabulous woman, Nikema Levy-Pounds, who's been really active. She's a professor at St. Thomas. She runs a law clinic for oppressed people, for black people. She's amazing. She's been legal advisor to Black Lives Matters. Anyway, she became president, and she invited a bunch of us to come, and we elected her president. And there's an all-female board, a multi-generational, such high energy. So we elected her, and then I just went this week to the first membership meeting, and it was like, oh my God, I didn't say a word. I mean, I didn't say a word because it wasn't what I needed to do. There was just great leadership. I could just join a committee, and it felt so great to not be like, second guessing or wondering, partly because the leadership was just so great, and partly because I finally figured out, like, I don't have to know everything, so I can just relax. And I am just so excited. Like, tomorrow we have a hearing to repeal this stupid spitting and lurking ordinance. And, my own city councilor was on the fence, and he's come around, and so I feel like that is a tiny step forward, but the ACLU just framed Minneapolis as one of the worst places in the country for racial disparity, and Nikema, again, got into Time Magazine and all these places saying we could be the next Baltimore, and that's a good thing to say, actually, to get people's attention. So anyway, that's a moment I see here. I wonder if you are seeing moments like that, because you travel around and look at what's going on in a lot of places. Are you seeing that kind of leadership emerging, or what are you seeing that's exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really incredible time in terms of, we've had waves of large-scale mobilization and awakening. Occupy Wall Street was just a few years ago, and the level of consciousness around the country around economic inequality has dramatically shifted. The conversation, I would do workshops all over the place and like kind of put up a pyramid around like wealth inequality, and people would know that it was skewed, but generally didn't have a sense that it was so deeply unequal. And so, Occupy Wall Street, really galvanized a lot of people. A lot of people got more experience with street demonstrations and kind of the sense of momentum. Again, not just that I'm in my community doing this and I'm just plugging along, but that you're a part of something bigger. In Canada, the Idle No More Indigenous-led resistance movement in Canada swept that, the Indigenous nations putting forward demands and mobilizing unbelievable, large scale. So the Black Lives Matter movement, and really Trayvon Martin's murder, and the young people who started organizing around Trayvon Martin, which is really where the first, Alicia Garza did her first, hashtag Black Lives Matter as a love note to the black community after the Trayvon Martin, the verdict from George Zimmerman came out. So with Black Lives Matter, there's so much new leadership all over the place, and a lot of it is, younger and queer and women and trans people, and it's fantastic. And that doesn't mean that men and non-queer people don't have important roles to play. It just means that there's a different kind of leadership dynamic that's emerging, including a leadership that is self-consciously thinking about not just concentrating power for a few leaders in a movement, but how to create expansive liberatory power that is cultivating and bringing in more and more layers of leadership. So that is incredible, and that's happening all over the country. And so what you talked about with this revitalized NAACP, I think things like that are happening all over the country with revitalized organizations or new organizations starting. And I think that there's also, even within the UU world, it's kind of creating opportunities where, Kenny Wiley is an incredible voice in the UU faith right now, writing for the UU world. I encourage everyone to be reading what he's putting out. I mean, he's a prophetic voice for our faith right now. And what he's doing as a young leader is remarkable. And so how can we be supporting and listening to these leaders rising? I mean, Tova Johnson, who is out in the Bay Area, out in San Francisco, who's been part of the Blackout Collective and these the Black-led direct actions out there, shutting down the Oakland Police Department, doing a whole lot of high-profile. These are, and Tova and Kenny recently, hosted like a webinar on Black Lives Matter for UUs across the country. So they're both young people, and so this leadership is emerging. So it's not a question of is it there. It's a question of what kind of support it is getting. What are people listening? And it's leadership that should be inspiring people, galvanizing people. I mean, even the Pope of the Catholic Church says our churches need to get more dirty in the fight for economic justice. So I mean, if the Pope is calling for the churches to get dirty in the fight for economic justice, the UUs need to be getting deep in it. And so we need to be able to be unabashedly courageous in our mistakes, but also in moving our resources, our legitimacy, supporting our emerging leaders. And it is every church I go to where I talk about, what's going on with Black Lives Matter, I mean, usually there's like a lot of folks that are kind of nervous and are uncomfortable and are scared and are kind of like, oh my gosh, is this going to be a sermon about how we're, all the white people here are a bunch of racists, and like, how can white people just be aware of privilege and stop making things horrible for people of color? But when I start talking about the vision that's emerging from these grassroots movements and how all of us have a role to play, and how this can be a redemption for our faith communities, for each of us as individuals, the ways that we are part of this society, all of us want to get free. And so the Black Lives Matter movement and the new leadership emerging are providing opportunities, visions, strategies, and vehicles for that to happen. So these are prophetic times, I believe, for our faith communities around how can we. The moment is that the door is open. It's like it is upon us. The choice. It's not where to go, what to do. It's what will we do with the times that we are in now. And so it is around us. And so we need to support each other to work through the things holding us back, to embrace this time and not waste this time on people who are stuck and don't want to move. Because in these kinds of movement times, they don't come often. But when they come, incredible things can happen. People can learn more in 3 months in a movement time like this than they can in 5 years of non-movement time, just reading things and going to meetings, which are important times to keep moving things forward. But in movement times, when hundreds of thousands of people are in the streets, are saying we demand a different world, unbelievable things can change and shift in the UU faith. Don't worry about the roadblock people, because sometimes I've seen where the church, some of the new leadership emerges and some of the roadblock people start being like, you know what, this is really different than what I was afraid of, and start getting involved too. So sometimes, like, for example, I was in a church where there was a roadblock person, but I knew that her son was really who was fired up and wanted to do the right thing. So I encouraged her son to recruit her mom, or his mom, to participate in this protest. I wasn't going to fight with the mom. I was going to encourage the son to help support the mom to have a transformational experience. And she did. 2 months later, she was like, yeah, we need to be going out to these demonstrations. So you got to figure out not just who you can move, but who are the people you can move, who can they move, and then how can we build some real momentum to make some shifts, because this is a time of shifts in our faith communities, in the country, and in our communities.
So, Chris, a little promotion.
Amen.
Woo!
A little promotion for you. You have, if people want to learn more, you have a book out, correct? And also, can people get you to come to their church or their organization and speak to them?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So this book is Towards Collective Liberation, and it is a collection of essays, reflections on lessons from organizing over the past 25 years. as well as some looking at historical examples like Ella Baker and the civil rights movement for inspiration on organizing, as well as some 5 case studies of anti-racist work in white communities with the vision of building multiracial movements for social justice. So the book, and then also, yeah, I go around, do workshops and sermons and talks in different communities, and you can contact me through chriscrass.org, or find me on Facebook at Chris Crass. And it's definitely about trying to help support the grassroots folks in all of our congregations who want to move things, who want to get support. So what I'm trying to do is not just like do a talk or a sermon, but try to help support some opening of space for the people that want to create momentum to have that talk or that sermon or that workshop be an opportunity to bring folks together who might want to do something and are interested, and then how to help support people to then move their longer term goals forward.
It's so cool. And it seems like you're active within the UU movement, but also much way out in the bigger world too. That's true, right? I mean, it's I know when you came here, it was a really interesting mix of people who knew about you from various channels. So that I'm always interested in that. People who are going through UUism out into the wider world, speaking with our values. Seems like that's working for you, huh?
Yeah. Well, the anti-racism work and the social justice work is what brought me to the UUs. The UU youth in 2003 brought me as part of an organization called Catalyst Project doing anti-racist political education sport. And so the UU youth brought us for a national leadership conference. And I'd always meet UUs all over the place doing social justice work, but I didn't really know what a UU was. And, a week with about 100 fired up UU teenagers and young adults with some amazing adult mentors like, Reverend Hope Johnson was there. Some incredible people. Within a week, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Sign me up. I am ready. So the youth brought me. It also coincided with I had set a date for myself of by the time I'm 30, I need to figure out my spirituality. So it worked right in there with turning 30. So it's like anti-racism brought me to the UUs, and now it's like I want to try to bring UU spirituality out into the work. Because a lot of the secular activist world is hungry for spiritual nourishment and is like, despair is thick. Despair is thick in so many people who want to see change. And so our spiritual tools, our spiritual abilities to call into sacred power are needed in communities all over the place. So now it's like anti-racism brought me to the UUs, and now I'm trying to help support UU spiritual superpowers to help support activist work more generally.
Amen. Let's hear it for UU activist superpowers. I'm for it. So thank you so much.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for being with us, Chris Crass. Next week we will have a topic of economic sustainability of ministry going on. Last words from anyone. Oh, and Bob, thank you, put up on the showcase. I'm not sure what the showcase means, but the Bell Hooks essay and Chris's book, and those are also on the CLF Facebook page. Last word, Hank?
No, thank you, Chris. That was great. It was inspiring. It was good. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm inspired. Thank you, Chris.
Have to have you come on again, and I know that you're a dad too, so I'd be very interested in how being a parent and all of this intersects. But
he's just about to be another parent again in July, so we wish you all that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, wow. All right, see you all next time.
Thank you.